Welcome back, everybody. It's Zach here, bringing you guys another fantasy football video. And I'm just going to be going over what I believe to be the optimal draft strategy with what I'm calling an early to middle first round pick. For the purposes of this video, I'm sort of assuming you've got the fourth overall pick, but it's going to apply to picks pretty much like 2 through 6, honestly, at this point in the draft. I did the optimal draft strategy if you have the 101 video just a little bit earlier. I'll be following this video up with another one going over what I think you should do with the 107, the 110, and the 112. So don't worry, wherever you guys end up drafting, I'm going to have a video that captures all of that. But it's really fun making all these videos. It's really fun to sort of see how I think you can build a team based off of where you end up starting to draft, and really fun to sort of see what kind of build options we have available to us. So it's going to be a lot of fun. I really enjoyed making this one. If you guys do have any questions or anything, let me know in the comments. I will highlight that I am basing all of these ADPs off of the Fantasy Pros ADP. It's the same as the Underdog ADP. Those will likely shift around, so I'll probably update this video as we get closer to real draft season. But really fun starting plays and just really fun to make these. So yeah, with that, let's just get into it. So starting things off with round one, I actually do think you've got a ton of flexibility here. I think if CeeDee Lamb or Tyreek Hill are available, you really do just have to take them. Ignore the typo there. I said CeeDee or Lamb. It's CeeDee or Tyreek Hill. You got to take them regardless. I think that they're just clearly the top two wide receivers on the board this season. There's no reason they should make it to you at pick 4. So if you've got pick 3, you're obviously taking one of those two. If you've got pick 4 later and they happen to be available, you've got to take one of those guys. Otherwise, though, I still would recommend taking the best wide receiver on the board. I think that Ja'Marr Chase, Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Justin Jefferson are all really fantastic picks here. I could even see you potentially considering a guy like A.J. Brown if you want to. I don't think I would go that far, but I think my main concern with taking a guy like Breece or Bijan, who are obviously great players, great picks, I've got no problem with doing that. It's just that I kind of view them as like identical players this season. They stat out effectively the same in my projections. I feel like they're in very similar situations. They've both got aging quarterbacks coming off of injuries. We're hoping for them to take that step forward and be like a true RB1 overall sort of season for them. And they both could do it, but I think that that's just the fact of the matter is I view them really pretty much the same. And I think that if you're the first team to take one of those two, you're effectively just getting a worse value than the guy that takes the second one, and then you're also having a later second round pick. And on top of that, we'll get into it later, but there's just a lot of really great running back values later on. I want to feel like I can capitalize on those, and taking a running back in round 1 is sort of going to force your hand and make you take receivers later that you don't necessarily want to. So I'd highly recommend taking one of the top 5 receivers here. If you happen to have like pick 6 or something and you don't want to take the last wide receiver on the board, you want to take Bijan or Breece, I've got no problem with that. I think it's going to work out fine, but I do generally recommend taking one of the first 5 receivers, whichever one you have highest here. Next up in round 2, I think that assuming you took a wide receiver in round 1, I would still probably be looking to take another wide receiver in round 2 regardless. I would, however, absolutely target Saquon Barkley at his 21st overall ADP. That is where you'll be picking if you've got pick 4. And if Jonathan Taylor slips as well, which is possible, I don't think you should really pass those guys up. Those should definitely be guys that are on your radar. But I don't want to make you guys feel like you need to force the running back position. I think that there really are going to be a ton of values in the 3rd, 4th, and 5th rounds, so that you really don't need to do that, especially in rounds 4 and 5. There are some absolutely insane values at the running back position. We'll talk about those later, but I don't want to put myself in a spot where I need to take a receiver later on because I went running back so early. And there's just a lot of really great wide receivers on the board still in round 2. You can get guys like Chris Olave, Nico Collins, Jalen Waddle, Deebo Samuel, Mike Evans. Plenty of great players right around this area. Devontae Adams, who I'm not high on, but I know a lot of you guys are. There's plenty of wide receiver talent here that I would just be super happy to take those guys, because when we get into it later, there are a lot of really great running backs available in round 3, 4, and 5. And if you end up with a running back here, you're probably going to feel like you got to take at least one receiver in those rounds, maybe 2. And it's just going to make it a little bit tough for you guys to capitalize on those values. So you need to get value if you're going to take a running back this early. And to me, that pretty much makes it Saquon or Jonathan Taylor. If a guy like Jahmyr Gibbs or something slips too, obviously you're doing that. But unless, like, I wouldn't reach and take a guy like Kyren Williams here. I wouldn't take a Devon Achane here. I would wait till round 3 to get to that running back if you need to, because I want to get a lot of value at the running back spot if I'm going to take one this early, and otherwise I'm just going to be super happy to take the best wide receiver on the board. Next up in round 3 here, I think if you do have no running backs at this point, I would strongly consider taking either Kyren Williams or Derrick Henry. Both those guys have a great shot to honestly be top 5 running backs this season. They're fantastic values, and getting guys like that at the end of the 3rd round is just, or at the beginning of the 3rd round, it's just an insane value. I can't imagine necessarily passing that up, especially if you don't have a running back at this point, but otherwise, I'd definitely still be open to hammering the wide receiver position. There's still some great wide receivers available here. We've got DJ Moore, DK Metcalf, and Malik Neighbors, all guys that I currently stat out inside of my top 15. Those are guys that should be awesome this season, and I think that being able to get those guys in round 3 is awesome, and I'm definitely not afraid of doing that. And even if you have no running backs, if you want to take another wide receiver here, go 3 wide receivers to start. I'd probably prefer to do that in like a 3 wide receiver league. If you're in a 2 wide receiver league, I'd probably start looking at running back a little bit earlier than in a 3 wide receiver league. But there are great options here, and you're still going to be okay at the running back position if you wait. So you don't need to force a running back here, even if you don't have one. And I think outside of that, I'm not going to take a quarterback or a tight end either. At the earliest, I'd be looking to take a quarterback or a tight end would be like the end of round 3, and you've got an early round 3 pick here, so I wouldn't be looking to do that. I'd prefer to wait till round 4, see what kind of values we can get, see if we can get a guy like Kincaid or McBride late in the 4th or something like that. And otherwise, I'm just going to be happy with the guys here and just let the quarterbacks and tight ends go on to later. Now, finally, in round 4 here, we really want to start taking a hard look at the running back position. There are 2 guys that should be available at your round 4 pick. That's Travis Etienne or Isaiah Pacheco. Both guys should easily be top 10 running backs this season. I also don't mind snagging guys like James Cook or Josh Jacobs, some really great values there. Being able to get guys like that in round 4, and you'll also be able to get a couple of them potentially in round 5 as well. It's just absolutely insane. These are guys that should be top 10 to 15 running backs, guys that historically would be like a round 2 pick, and being able to get a guy like that at the end of round 4 is just insane this season. The running backs had pushed way down the draft boards because of how poorly they performed last season, and I want to be able to capitalize on that this year. So we want to target the wide receiver position early. It's going to allow us to take running backs later on in the draft, and it's going to give us a lot of options here, and especially because the wide receivers going around here just aren't exactly guys I'm excited about. It's a bit of a dead zone for the position. I'd probably be looking to avoid the wide receivers in both rounds 4 and 5 because I really don't like any of the names available at that ADP. I would feel like I need to reach to get some guys, and it's just why we want to be aggressive with wide receivers early, even more so just because I don't want to take ones here, and I want to make sure that I leave round 5 with 2 wide receivers at a minimum. And if you happen to only have one, you're probably going to take a wide receiver you're not super excited about in one of these next 2 rounds. And if you happen to have already 2 running backs, I happen to already have 2 running backs. I do want to highlight that I'd be super open to taking a quarterback or a tight end here if there's value that presents itself. Guys like Trey McBride, Lamar Jackson, Mahomes, Mark Andrews, Dalton Kincaid, all great picks here, although I'd prefer to wait till round 5. So play the ADP game a little bit, see if anybody who has one of those top 3 picks picked a quarterback or a tight end already. You know they're not going to. It's going to make you have a bit of a better shot at getting one of those guys later on here in round 5. So keep an eye on that, but if you want to take one of those guys here at round 4, I don't mind that at all. Next, we're here in round 5, and I just want to highlight this is another great opportunity to take a running back. So I just do want to highlight that you really can not draft any running backs for the first 3 rounds and still get 2 really great running backs, especially by waiting until rounds 4 or 5. And you could even take no running backs in the first 2 rounds and go 3 straight if you wanted to in rounds 3 through 5 and feel like you've got 3 top 10 running backs, which is pretty insane, waiting 2 rounds to do that and still getting that value. But James Cook and Josh Jacobs should both be available at this point. Those are some really great values. I would definitely be trying to get one of those 2 guys here in round 5. And if both of them are gone, Rachaad White should be available. Joe Mixon should be available. Those are really talented players that should put up a lot of fantasy points again this season. So I think if those guys end up as your RB2, you're perfectly set anyway. And if you already have 2 running backs, I would, in general, avoid taking the 3rd running back. I do want to be highlighting and really being aggressive about the wide receiver position, especially because there are still some running backs later on that we do like quite a bit. So the wide receivers seem to dry up just a little bit early, along with the potential value of a tight end or a quarterback pick here. But I will highlight, though, that James Cook, Josh Jacobs, the value is too great there. If they're available in round 5, even if I have 2 running backs already, I'm still probably taking them. They're just way too good, and I want those guys on my roster. And it doesn't hurt to have an extra running back, especially as the season goes on. And I just want to highlight as well that I really don't like any of the wide receivers in this round either. Calvin Ridley, Jaden Reed, probably my 2 favorite guys going around this ADP, and even that feels like a little bit of a reach for me. I just don't necessarily love the ceiling of any of those guys, and I don't think anything really separates them from a guy like Deontay Johnson, who goes 2 rounds later. It just makes it tough for me to be super excited about that when I can get a potentially better player later on. So I don't love wide receiver here, so if I happen to feel happy with my roster, if I've got 2 wide receivers and 2 running backs, I might pretty strongly consider the tight end or quarterback position. All the names that I mentioned before, McBride, Kincaid, Andrews, Lamar, Mahomes, Stroud maybe is in consideration here. Anthony Richardson would be an option. If you want to look at the quarterback or tight end position, I think this is a good spot to do it if you happen to have 2 running backs and two wide receivers, because I don't like the wide receivers here. You don't need to go 3 running backs, and there's plenty of talent left at the quarterback and tight end position, so you could get a stud here if you want to. Next, we're into round 6 here, and now it's really just all about getting the best value on the board. You should have a pretty balanced roster to this point. You should have 2 running backs and 2 receivers, plus either a quarterback, tight end, or another running back or wide receiver. So you should have quite a bit of flexibility here with this pick. My favorite picks in this area at the wide receiver and running back position are guys like Deontay Johnson, David Montgomery, Ladd McConkey, Alvin Kamara, all really great values, and pretty insane that we can get these guys at the end of round 6. And I also want to highlight this might be your last chance to consider getting a top-tier tight end. If Evan Ingram's on the board, all the other big big names are gone, I would strongly consider taking him here, even though it's a little bit of a reach by about 10 picks. I think Evan Ingram's a pretty huge tier break ahead of the last guys, along with David Njoku, who tends to go later. So you could get it Njoku later as well if you want. But I think it's pretty important to leave the first 7 rounds with a quarterback and a tight end. And if you don't have one of those positions, it starts to get a little bit scary. So I wouldn't mind reaching just a little bit to get my favorite tight end or quarterback left on the board. On top of that, like I said, quarterback is in play this round, but I want to be the one that's waiting for value. If you get into round 6 here, you're probably just looking at taking the last of the guys like Kyler Murray, Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow, Jordan Love. You want to be the team that takes the last one of those guys unless you've got a strong lean one way or another, because they're pretty similar players, and just taking the last one means you got the best value. I will note, though, that if CJ Stroud is on the board at this point, he'd be an auto pick for me. If I don't have a quarterback, I'd be super stoked to get him at the end of round 6. Next in round 7, really similar to round 6, to be honest, and it makes a lot of sense. We're 8 picks apart here. I would target the tight end or quarterback position if you need either one of them. I do definitely start to get pretty nervous about how that spot's going to look for me if I get through round 7 and I don't have one of those 2 spots. Evan Ingram and David Njoku probably still available, so if you don't have a tight end, I would definitely highlight those guys. Like I said, there were still those quarterbacks like Jordan Love, Dak Prescott, Joe Burrow, Kyler Murray. I would pretty strongly consider taking one of those guys if they're still available. The odds are that over the next 20 picks before your next pick, those guys will dry up. So if you don't have a quarterback at that point, I would highly recommend making sure you grab one of those guys as well. And if you happen to have both those positions sorted out, then you're just going to look for the best value at the wide receiver or running back position. Alvin Kamara, David Montgomery, Deontay Johnson, Najee Harris, Jonathan Brooks, Zach Moss, Raheem Mostert, all really great values here. I'd love to get any one of those guys at round 7, and just whoever you like the most, really. You don't even have to go with those names. There's a lot of great options here. And then for rounds 8 and beyond, if you still don't have a quarterback or a tight end here, it's probably too late. If David Njoku or Jordan Love are available, gotta get those guys. You want to make sure that you can still get a top-tier guy if they're available, and you somehow got blessed enough that those guys made it to you at the end of round 8. But otherwise, you're probably just going to wait on the position for a little bit. At tight end, you can get guys like Pat Freiermuth later. You can go for just Dalton Schultz later. Just take a flyer on a guy. You're probably streaming the position at that point anyway. Sort of the same thing with the quarterback position. You missed out on all the upside guys. You can probably just take guys like Tua or Jared Goff later and just sort of stream the position, play matchups, and be okay with that. You're not going to be screwed if that's what happens. And taking one in round 9, like taking a Jared Goff in round 9 doesn't make a lot of sense because you can get the same caliber player in round 12. So don't reach on the quarterback. If all the good ones are gone, wait it out. You're going to be fine. There will be a couple teams that take backup quarterbacks, but it's not going to negatively impact you too much. And otherwise, you probably just want to target upside the entire rest of the way unless you feel super thin at the position. Like, for example, if you've only got 2 running backs, you probably want to get a third one that's guaranteed touches. So I would look at someone like James Conner or Raheem Mostert. But otherwise, I'd be highlighting young players and good offenses, target guys like Zach Moss and ambiguous backfields, Rico Dowdle in an ambiguous backfield, target rookies, young players, Jameson Williams, for example, Rashid Shaheed, guys that could potentially find themselves in new roles and we don't necessarily how good they're going to be. And on top of that, I just want to highlight the ADP matters a lot less when we get to this point in the draft. Most of these players at this point in the draft, when we get to rounds 8 and beyond, it's kind of a crapshoot anyway. Like I said before, it's a really fun exercise to just sort of look at the teams you drafted last season, look at the guys you drafted in rounds 8 and beyond, guys that you were drafting to sort of be on your bench, and just be honest with yourself about how many of those guys were hits. I put a lot of time into this. I can tell you right now, I don't have a super high hit rate on those guys either, and I'm sure you don't either. And it's a good understanding to know that you want to make sure you're getting your guys, because the guys that are being drafted that late, it's a bit of a lottery ticket anyway, and you just want to make sure that you're leaving the draft with the guys you want. If you take a guy 10 slots ahead of ADP, it's not going to kill you, and you're going to bait yourself up over the course of the season if you don't get someone. I had a league last year where I sort of tried to play the ADP game with Tank Dell. I was super high on Tank Dell all off season. Played the ADP game a little bit, someone beat me to him, and it made me super upset, and I was beating myself up about it all season. So just get your guys. You'll be a lot happier with that, and if things go wrong, it's round 8 plus. These guys don't matter a whole lot in terms of how your team's going to succeed if they fail, so you can just move on and get a new guy off waivers pretty easy. And then I'll wrap this up with just some general tips for an early middle round pick. I think it just makes way too much sense to go with a wide receiver early on. I know I said earlier that it makes a little bit of sense if you want to consider a guy like Bijan or Breece, but the more I look at all the values, the running back positions in round 4 and 5, and even guys later on like Zach Moss, Raheem Mostert, Najee Harris, James Conner, there's some really good players that go really late in drafts right now, and I feel like you get really hamstrung at the wide receiver position if you don't take one early on. It puts you in a spot where you really are going to need to take a wide receiver in these middle rounds, and that's not where the value is. So I would definitely highlight or make an effort to grab a wide receiver in round 1, and like I said, target running backs in round 4 and 5. And then I also want to mention that you can definitely play the ADP game here. Pay a lot of attention to the teams drafting ahead of you. So if you've got pick 4, teams 1, 2, and 3, keep an eye on those rosters if you want a quarterback or a tight end. Keep an eye on which of those teams have drafted them. They're unlikely to draft in between your pick and your pick in round 2 and your pick in round 3, for example. It's going to give you a lot of sort of insight in terms of what picks are going to be made in between your 2 picks, and you can gain quite a bit of an edge just by making sure that you pick the player that's a little bit lower or higher in ADP, target the guys that are later on after that. And on top of that, I think you can pay a lot of attention to the rosters of the teams that are being drafted around you. If you've got pick 4, odds are that picks 2, 3, 5, and 6 all also drafted wide receivers with their first overall pick, assuming you grab one in round 4 as well. And it's going to set you up for potentially having a really similar build to all 4 of those other teams. And it's going to make it really easy to identify what players and positions teams are going to be targeting. That way you can sort of just prepare for that as you're going on. Understand the ADP might not necessarily matter because you and the 2 teams around you might need the same kind of player, need the same wide receiver position, need the same tight end position. And it's just going to sort of help you keep in mind what you're necessarily looking for, and it's also just a good way to gauge how your draft is going. You can see if you like one of their teams better than yours, you're probably not doing great, and you need to make sure that you can do something to make up for that as well. So that'll do it for this video. Up next, I'll be going over my optimal draft strategy with a late middle round pick. I'll be operating under the assumption you guys have to pick 107. So if you guys are going to end up with that draft pick, I highly recommend you watch that video. If you guys haven't watched my optimal draft strategy with the 101 pick, I would highly recommend watching that one as well. We're going to go over 107, we'll do 110 and the 112. So 3 more of these videos will come out. It's going to be a lot of fun making them. Just been a lot of fun sort of looking at all the different roster constructions, really sort of getting a gauge of what teams are going to look like this season. So it's a lot of fun doing this, really getting into a lot more drafts lately as well, doing a lot more mocks, doing some best ball and stuff as well. So if you guys want to see any of that, I've been thinking about doing some live content as well. Let me know what days you guys think would work best. I've been thinking about doing like a Sunday live stream going over some best ball drafts or something like that, just doing a different sort of draft for you guys live every week. I think that'd be pretty fun, so stay tuned for that. If you guys want to make sure you don't miss any more content, just make sure you subscribe to the channel. There's going to be at least 4 videos a week coming out the entire rest of the off season, along with several videos and probably even more than that during the course of the regular season as well. It's going to be a lot of fun. I just want to be here all season to help you guys win some championships. So subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. If you made it this far, please do give the video a thumbs up as well. Helps with the algorithm and helps me know that I'm doing a good job, and just helps me know that you guys appreciate what we're doing here. So I appreciate you guys. You guys mean a lot to me, and it's just been a lot of fun. We're going to keep it going. So appreciate you guys, and I'll catch you with the next one. Peace. Thank you guys for watching. If you haven't already, please be sure to subscribe to the channel, like the video, check out these other videos here if you haven't. If you want more content, please feel free to follow me on Twitter at RealSteelFFB. I'll be more active on there as the season goes on. Thanks. Catch you later.